Before we get started, I'd like to set the stage so you understand where I'm coming from here. Sunbreak at launch was a near-perfect expansion for Rise to me. It avoided the pitfalls that base Rise fell into by releasing with a complete story that made its credits roll feel deserved. It surpassed its high-rank counterpart by having a better-paced rank grind after the final boss, with plenty of gear to build up along the way, and raising the difficulty to give Rise's kinetic combat a chance to truly shine. The fact that my only gripes were that the Switch skill swap felt like a needless addition, and that the Switch desperately needs a hardware revision, should speak volumes to how highly I value what Sunbreak brings to the table. Which is why I find my frustration with Sunbreak's first title update so baffling. With advertised heavy hitters like Seething Basil and Lucent Narga, it should have been an easy home run. But for me, Title Update 1 is divided into two parts. One half makes an incredible first impression, with stellar new hunts that put you to the test, and reward you generously while still respecting your time, within reason for this series. Meanwhile, the other half is marred by nearly every progression-based complaint I had with base Rise, while also tossing additional RNG onto the pile as a slap in the face to anyone who isn't willing to dump an abhorrent amount of time. The 4 new non-afflicted hunts cemented my desire to make this video in the first place, but the investigation grinding afterwards to reach even a single A5 hunt nearly convinced me to scrap the idea altogether. Anomaly Investigations on their own aren't inherently bad. In fact, I actually like the Guild Quest approach as a means to spice up the Afflicted Parts grind with additional conditions and target monsters. Since Wyvern riding essentially turns monsters into temporary weapon classes, getting an Afflicted hunt with some of your favorites to mount can feel extra satisfying to find. It's a way in which the RNG nature of investigations is used to great effect. The thing is, this is all investigations needed to justify their existence to me. They could have easily stopped there, and I would have been satisfied. But they didn't stop there. Instead, investigations introduce a third rank to grind in the form of anomaly research, and it exists solely to lock away the new A5 afflicted monsters from players lacking an excess of time or patience. For context, my AR started around the low 20s when I updated the game, and the A5 Afflicted can't appear as newly discovered investigations until AR51 at the earliest, with my first A5 not showing until I reached AR61. That means for just my first A5 hunt, I had to climb more ranks than the final MR threshold to reach Scorned Magnamalo, and almost as many ranks as it took to reach the base game's final boss. Let that sink in for a minute. As if to add more fuel to the fire, you don't even get access to a dedicated A5 quest list until AR81, which to my understanding, you have to piece together yourself by finding all of the new monsters through investigations, or by subjecting yourself to random lobbies hunting the monster you want. What I find especially irritating about this kind of padding is that it only exists to drag out the experience for busier or more casual fans of the series when it absolutely didn't need to. A1 through A4 all unlocked through Master Rank Urgents up to MR50, so why couldn't A5 quests have been set to unlock at MR70 after the Valstrax Urgent? It would have felt far more natural for newer players still making the climb, and given invested fans a direct on-ramp to more new hunts after Seething, Lucent, and the Metal Wraths. It's also important to note that since the materials needed to unlock the highest gear augments are seemingly locked behind A5s, that mandated RNG fest to find an A5 quest serves as an out-of-place roadblock to your endgame gear optimization. And really, I'd argue that's my biggest sticking point. Anomaly Investigations share the exact same reason why I disliked Rampage quests in base Rise. They're harmless side modes that are genuine fun when I'm in the mood for them, until the developers arbitrarily decide they have to become a chore for the sake of artificially bumping player engagement so it looks good to some corporate suits. It says a lot that the one part of the lead up to Title Update 1 I was apprehensive of, the RNG armor augmentation, didn't even have the chance to bother me because I spent way more time cursing the game for dragging out the process of augmenting the armor I wanted to work on. Is it any wonder I wanted to stop playing? That's such a shitty way for me to feel coming out of this patch when I just got done singing the launch of Sunbreak's praises like 2 weeks ago. It stings even more because when the game actually lets you hunt what you want, when you want, this update fucking rules. All 4 of the new non-afflicted monsters are fantastic additions to Sunbreak's roster. They continue the trend of having snappy attacks that put Rise's systems to the test, all the while looking absolutely breathtaking. Seething Basilgeuse was probably the inclusion I was looking forward to the most, and, well, his fight is certainly entertaining at least. He frequently tosses out a larger density of scales, his explosions dyed in this bright purple hue that I can't help but love, his air raids come out faster, hell, I think they even widened the radius on his explosions a bit. He makes a great first impression for the new hunts, though I might be a tad biased since Basil is one of my favorite world monsters I was introduced to through Rise. It's just a shame that the gear you can make from him lacks the same bombastic flair. For a monster whose armor I attribute primarily to gun lance usage, it's almost farcical how little the Pride set contributes to that weapon, and the set's unique skill, Guts, is just unfortunate, to put it lightly. You know, as someone who mained Gunlance for the entire base game, you'd think I'd be a bit more annoyed by this, but the fact that, and forgive me for jumping the gun a bit, Narga has a better Gunlance set than Basil, in the same patch no less, turns what would have been sheer frustration into nothing more if not a decent punchline. Also, nothing really of note on the weapon side either, though that I did expect, both because the majority of gun lances in this game are liquid ass, and Basil's competition for a blast lance was Pyrarachna. Frankly, he was doomed from the start, and I can't bring myself to blame him for that. For simplicity's sake, it's probably best that I talk about the Metal Wraths together. They do have some distinct patterns to them, like Gold doing this frantic spin before spitting its third fireball, or Silver raising the ground with multiple streaks of fire, but for the most part, the two share a lot of the same new characteristics, like being blisteringly quick, and having an enraged state that turns their flames blue. And thankfully, unlike Basil, Gold and Silver both have exceptionally viable new armor skills. Silver kinda gets the more basic of the bunch in my opinion, but I can't deny how powerful Element Exploit is as a damage buff. Oddly enough, Gold actually got 2 new skills, and they're both pretty good in their own ways. We now have a defense equivalent to Agitator and Defiance, and while I wouldn't suggest you go out of your way to mix pieces into a set for it, Defiance's decoration is only level 1, so it's kinda the new go-to filler deco if you don't need anything else. But that's not the skill on this set I really care about. No, I want to talk about Status Trigger. I've always had a fondness for status ailments in Monster Hunter. There's something satisfying about watching a monster's health slowly erode from poison, or seeing stray blasts ignite amidst a flurry of blows. It's a kind of joy I just don't get from whipping around traditional elemental weapons, and it's why slapping Foray onto a dual blade set was my de facto way to use that weapon at Sunbreak's launch. Status Trigger feels like the missing piece in a puzzle I didn't know needed solving, and the way it slots into status dual blade builds is, for lack of a better term, perfect. I already have a habit of maxing out Evade Extender when I play Dual Blades, so I can blitz across the map with ease and weave through just about any attack. So the fact that this skill now directly rewards that evade tank playstyle by buffing the rate at which you apply status buildup makes the weapon feel so much more enjoyable to pilot than it already did before. And as an added bonus, the 2 gold Wrath pieces with the new skill come packing level 2 foray, evade window, and even chain crit for those element ailment hybrid weapons. It's just stellar. I genuinely don't think I could ask for much more here, and we still have one more monster to go. Lucent Nargacuga rounds out the 4 new monsters added in TU1, and I'd like to say that they saved the best for last, but there's a bit of weirdness here that takes me out of the experience just a little bit. See, Lucent's gimmick is that he periodically turns invisible by refracting the moonlight off of his fur before attacking. The idea is that while he's in this state, you have to rely on limited indicators like the trail from his red glowing eyes, the poison emanating from the tip of his tail, and the dirt he kicks up when he leaps from his current position. Combine all this with the fact that the wind-up to his strongest tail slam out of invisibility muffles the music, an added touch I absolutely adore, and fighting Lucent can be pretty unnerving. Except, because of what I can only assume is a bug, the target cam can still lock onto Lucent while he's invisible, which really takes the wind out of the sails on this one, considering that's the main distinction between Lucent and the original. It doesn't completely ruin the fight, mind you. Lucent is still pretty challenging even with the handicap, and absolutely knocked some brain cells loose with one of those double tail slams. I also gotta bring special attention to the falling rings of poison spikes. I don't find myself getting caught by them all that often, but it's probably the flashiest move in his entire kit. And from my limited understanding, it's also apparently another carryover from Frontier, like with the status trigger skill on Gold Wrath set, which is a cool callback if that's the case. Speaking of armor skills though, Lucent also has 2 new skills, just like Rathian. Both of them kind of fall into a similar camp as Element Exploit for me in that they're relatively basic but effective. Adrenaline Rush is just status trigger for attack power, not much to add there. But then we have Sneak Attack, and this is where my earlier quip about Narga having a better gun lance set than Basil comes full circle. See, for reasons that elude me, and evidently many others, Sneak Attack is one of the rare instances of a damage modifier that affects both the gun lance's happy slap horseshit and shelling damage. This is particularly odd, given that the only other main ways to affect shelling damage are through a weapon shelling level and rampage decorations like the exploit gems. So, between Lucent's lock-on bug, and that apparently most of Sneak Attack's skill text was mistranslated, it wouldn't surprise me if this shelling buff was unintended too, which means there's a non-zero chance that it'll be patched out later. Man, I gotta find a new weapon to main. This shit is just depressing. Overall, Title Update 1 of Sunbreak is a surprisingly mixed bag for me. The 4 new monsters the update leads off with blew me away with how much I enjoyed their hunts. And most of the new skills buff a number of playstyles, regardless of whether or not all of those buffs were intentional or not. I appreciate the addition of a guild quest mode for afflicted monsters, and think it serves its purpose well of keeping endgame players occupied. But brute forcing anomaly research into that system as a 3rd rank to grind... God, what were they thinking? The fact that a 5-star is gated behind a brand new grind when there was already a perfectly natural threshold the unlock could have been placed at is baffling to me. The AR-51 and 81 roadblocks have no purpose to hardcore fans who will blast through them in a day like they don't even exist. They only serve to deny casual and busier fans the ability to hunt what they want in a timely manner, because they didn't set aside time for an update whose release date was effectively shadow dropped. And the fact that you have to randomly unlock each individual A5 monster after the first AR threshold is just icing on the cake. especially since the A5 materials are used for the most desirable weapon augments and enabling rare 10 armor augmentation at all. It's an excessive additional grind that piles an obscene amount of progression-based RNG onto a series that already had more than enough RNG in its core gameplay loop. All in all, I hope that future updates stick to adding a few new non-afflicteds and some cool new skills. Just leave anomalies be at A5 if you're gonna continue the AR RNG, because I'm honestly not sure I could handle another polarizing paradigm shift like this update was. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you. It means a lot that you were willing to sit through all the way. If you enjoyed your time, I'd greatly appreciate if you'd leave a like and a comment to aid in my eternal struggle with the YouTube algorithm. And if you'd like to see more of this kind of content, you might even consider subscribing and ringing that vile bell icon so YouTube can probably notify you when I will content into existence. I'm also fairly active on Twitter at ZRV Gaming, where I yell about not only video games, but TCGs as well, primarily Cardfight Vanguard and Yu-Gi-Oh! So feel free to follow me there for ramblings and updates alike if you feel so inclined. Thank you again so much for watching, and have a good one.